3 lines from the bottom on Nun Zayin Amud Beis. This Gemara is sort of an interesting discussion, whether it's really a question how exactly we know the concepts of essay that a positive commandment overrides a negative commandment. And that sort of leads into the discussion, which will continue, which continues on Chesam Amud Beis. Okay, so 57b, 3 lines from the bottom. 1 second.
Oh, backing up.
It's really second to bottom line. The Tana Rabbanon. We learned as follows. So the Gemara is trying to prove that the concept of hakafas kol harosh is there's a debate regarding hakafas kol harosh. What does hakafas kol harosh mean? We know that a Jewish male is prohibited to cut off his payas, the corner of his head, and the question is, if somebody shaves his head completely, does that violate the prohibition of hakafas kol harosh? Perhaps cutting off the payas is only if one cuts off just his payas. But if he cuts off everything, there's no violation. So the Gemara tries to support that this is a debate, and it's dependent on the 2 following opinions. The Tana Rabbanon, we learned as follows. We saw many parts of this Gemara previously. It's on Daf Mem. Roshai. It says by Nazir. It says by Mitzora. 1 second. That at the 7th day he has to cut his whole head. What does it need to say Roshai? The Fisha Nemer, let's since it says that a Jew is not allowed to cut off his payas, I would think that a Mitzora also should not be allowed to cut off his payas. Talmud Leimer Roshai. So therefore the Torah says Roshai that even though you're a Mitzora, you still have to cut off your payas. Even though typically you're not allowed to. Since you're a Mitzora, even though typically you would not be allowed to cut off your payas, as a Mitzora you're allowed to. Another Brayso learns this out from a different source. He learns it out from those. 1 second.
Gonna start at 6:10 or what?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
1 second.
Tomorrow, 6 o'clock.
Yeah. Maybe machine 1 second. Okay. The Tanidach, another Brayso says a little bit of a different source. The Tanidach, Roshai. It says by Mitzvah the word Roshai. With regard to Nazir, it says that a Nazir cannot cut his hair. I would think that if a Mitzvah is also a Nazir, he should not be able to cut his hair. Talmud Leimer Roshai, so therefore it says Roshai. Again, so what's the debate here? According to the first opinion, Mitzvah tells you that essay say effectively. We're talking about a regular Jew who has a a prohibition to a prohibition to cut his hair. And as a Mitzvah, he cuts his payas anyway. The second source tells me that the pasuk is coming to tell me about Nazir. So Nazir has a positive and a negative commandment, right? There's Gadol Paras Arosha, he has to grow his hair, and a negative commandment of Tar Lo Yavra Arosha. There should not be a razor passing over his head. According to the second version of the Gemara, we're coming to include that even a Mitzvah who's also a Nazir also has to cut his head. Okay. My love must be Taroihin. This is the debate. Lamanda Amar, according to the opinion that says Nazir, that the source that Mitzvah specifically includes a Mitzvah is also a Nazir. Kasavar he holds hakafas kol rosh loishma hakafa. He holds shaving your entire head is not considered hakafa. It's not considered cutting your payas. So therefore, there's no need to tell me a pasuk by a regular Jew, because a regular Jew does not incur a violation of shaving his payas when he shaves his entire head. Whereas the first opinion says, and therefore so therefore the pasuk comes to tell me about a Nazir who has a positive and a negative commandment. The first opinion that says that Mitzvah is coming to include a regular Jew, He says that cutting off your entire head, shaving your entire head, is also a violation of Payas, and therefore of and therefore the pasuk is coming to include a regular Jew. Yes, we're on 58a, about 8 lines down. First word in the line is v'chi asakra. L'mitchi lav greda. It's coming to include a regular Jew who potentially would violate the law of cutting his payas, and the Torah is telling me that Torah is telling me he doesn't violate. Since he's a mitzvah, he's not obligated to. Or I should say, he's obligated to violate the law of l'sekifa pas r'shechem. So this seems to be the debate between the two opinions. Amar Rava says not convinced. Tekula Amal, this first word in the line. Hakafas kol harosh lo shema hakafa. Shaving your entire head is not a violation of cutting off your payas. So okay. So what do we need a pasuk for? We're talking about a situation where a guy is a mitzvah, and he's about to cut off his hair. And when he does this, first he makes himself a cool haircut where he shaves his payas first, and then he shaves everything else. Since had he shaved all his complete head at once, he would not be liable because he's a mitzvah and he's obligated to shave his head. In a scenario where he shaves his payas first and then shaves the rest of his head, I would think also if he did it in a two-step process, he also would not be chayev, and therefore the pasuk is coming to tell me that even if you're a mitzvah and even if you're a mitzvah, you have to shave it completely at once. You can't do it in two rounds, and that's the pasuk is coming to tell me according to the first opinion. In other words, according to the first opinion, the truth of the matter is that a mitzvah cutting his hair is not a violation of hakafa, of hakafa's payas. We're talking about a guy who did it in a two-step process, and the pasuk is telling me that if you do it in a two-step process, you're still chayev. You have to do it all at once.
Means some of it go away and come back.
Sorry?
Two-step process.
So two-step process means sort of cutting the payas first and then cutting everything else.
Oh, okay.
Whereas the right way to do it would be to cut everything at once. Obviously, you can't do everything at once. It takes a few minutes to cut all your hair, but sort of not to do just the payas specifically. Okay, now there's one problem with this. Is there any reason to think? Let's say the Torah says that as a mitzvah, you're allowed to shave your payas. You have to shave your whole head. Is there any reason to think that you can first do your payas and then do everything else? Because as we know, whenever a loisasei pushes away an essay, a negative commandment takes precedence over a positive commandment. The halacha is that we do whatever we can not to violate the negative commandment. So, for example, if it is plausible for a person to fulfill the positive commandment and not violate the negative commandment, then he is obligated to do so. So, therefore, since in this scenario you can shave separately, you can shave together, in which case your positive commandment directly violates the negative commandment, you are not allowed to shave separately. In that case, the positive commandment is not pushing away the negative commandment because you're not shaving completely. So therefore, there's no reason for a pasuk to tell me that I would violate the prohibition in a two-step process. Obviously, I would violate the prohibition in a two-step process. That's the regular rule of Esed Dechalaisasei. When a positive commandment pushes away a negative commandment, we always try to accommodate the negative commandment to the extent that we're able to. So the Gemara asks, do I need a pasuk to tell me that a two-step process you're liable? It's obvious. Any scenario where you find a positive and a negative commandment, if you can fulfill the positive commandment, then that's good. If you can fulfill both of them, that's fine. If you can't, Yavi Esev Yitzchas Loisasei. Then we say the positive commandment pushes away the negative commandment, but only in a situation where they can't both be accomplished. And therefore, that must be where you're shaving his head completely at once, and not where you're doing a two-step process. Okay. So Gemara says, Gemara changes. Okay, the opposite. Now the Gemara is saying that obviously shaving one's entire head is a violation of Loisakifa Pas V'Shechem. I'm sorry. Shaving one's entire is a law of Loisakifa Pas V'Shechem, of a Jew cutting off his pass. And therefore, the first opinion that says that Mitzvah excludes a regular Jew, that makes a lot of sense. A regular Jew, even if he's shaving his entire head, is violating the law of cutting his pass. Therefore, Mitzvah says, even though you're a regular Jew and you have prohibition, as a Mitzvah, you have to cut your entire head. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. The second opinion, though, he goes a step further. He says not just Mitzvah, even a Mitzvah, not just a Mitzvah to a regular Jew, even a Mitzvah to a Jew who's a Nazir. Nazir is not allowed to cut his hair. Mitzvah tells him he cuts his hair. Okay. So the opinion that says that the pasuk is coming to refer to Nazir, Lav Greda Minole. How does he know that a loisase pushes away? I'm sorry, an essay pushes away a loisase. In other words, why does he need to go to step 2 of an essay and the loisase together? Why doesn't he go to stage 1, just an essay pushing away a loisase? Gemara says because he already knows essay pushes away a loisase. How does he know that? He knows it from the fact that you can put a garment of, if you're wearing a tzitzis, and the garment is made out of linen, but the strings are made out of wool. You're allowed, even though that's typically a prohibition of shatnez, with tzitzis it's permitted. Now you may be asking, well, why can't you just use linen tzitzis, right? Because, like we said, the rule of Esed Echaloisase is that if you could avoid doing it, then do it. Avoid it. So why do you choose to wear a pair of tzitzis that's linen and wool? So the answer is very simple. The answer is that when you have when you dye the tchelas, it holds better in wool than in linen. So if a guy has a linen garment, the only way to put tchelas in it is by using wool, or not the only way, but the preferred way would be using wool. So therefore, the Torah says the positive commandment of tzitzis pushes away the lois of shatnez. Minoli, how do we know this? Yalaf megedilim. We learn it from tzitzis. Tzitzis are called gedilim in the Torah. To Amakra, the Torah says, like silba shatnez. Don't put on shatnez. What's shatnez? Wool and linen together. The Tanya we learned, like silba shatnez. Ha gedilim tasel mehem. You're not allowed to put on shatnez, but because shatnez and tzitzis are right next to each other, we say that if you're wearing tzitzis, then tzitzis pushes away shatnez. Okay, so therefore we have a source that esed echaloisa say. So why does the Torah repeat itself with regard to Mitzvah? It must be it's esed echaloisa say ve'esed. In other words, a scenario of a Mitzvah who's also a Nazir. We together?
Perfect. Right out of my mouth, Rabbi.
Okay. According to the opinion that says that Esed Echalaisase is from Mitzvah, meaning a Mitzvah who's a regular Jew is Esed Echalaisase. My time why doesn't he learn it from Tzitzis? He would tell you like the Rava Hudas. The reason why he doesn't learn it out of Tzitzis is because Tzitzis tells me the halacha of Rava. The Rava Rami. Rava had the following question. It says the tzitzis has to be on the corner of the garment, and we understand from there min kanaf. It has to be the same variety as the garment. A bunch of words here. Hold on a second. Let me change the cursor. Haknaf min knaf. So the Torah says, yeah, the tzitzis have to be the same variety as the garment. That's the fact that tzitzis hakanaf means that tzitzis on the corner have to be the same as the corner. So if they're linen, they both have to be linen. If one's wool, they both have to be wool. And then the next pasuk talks about shatnez. It's about putting tzemer or pishtim together. The prohibition that one should not wear wool and linen together. So what do we see from there? So if you're wearing wool or linen tzitzis, then it doesn't make a difference what material the garment is made out of. Whatever material the garment is made out of, even though the wool and linen tzitzis are not min kanaf, they're not the variety of the corner, they're kosher. So in other words, let's say you have a tzitzis, a beged, the garment is made out of, let's talk about a shirt, because today we have a special tzitzis garment, but let's say a guy has a 4-cornered shirt. Okay, so he has to put on tzitzis. So if his shirt is made out of wool, then you could put tzitzis out of any material. You could put tzitzis out of wool, or if the guy's wearing the correct chelas, then you could put on tzitzis of linen. Now today nobody says that we have you can't do this, even if you're wearing the thing that they claim is chelas. You can't put on. Okay, but let's say your garment is your shirt is a cotton shirt, so you have to put on either cotton tzitzis or wool and linen. Wool and linen are sort of their own category. The wool, it's like type O blood, right? It's universal donor, right?
Yes, yeah.
Universal donor, type O.
Type O, yeah.
Tzemer pishtim, wool and linen is type O. It works with any type of garment. Whereas if the garment is made of some other variety and he doesn't want to put on wool, or he doesn't want to put wool or linen tzitzis, he has to make the tzitzis the same variety as the garments.
You're not saying that tzitzis of wool and linen is one, two separate.
Right. It's nothing to do with putting on a garment that has wool and linen together. Presumably you could do that, but the way we would know that is actually from Mitzorah. The fact that a Mitzorah who's a regular Jewish male, shaves his entire head. So presumably you could put on tzitzis of a linen garment with wool and tzitzis. But actually the tzitzis itself doesn't tell me that the source is not from tzitzis. The source would be from Mitzorah. What tzitzis tells me is that linen and wool and linen tzitzis are universal. They universally work for any material the garment may be made out of. Okay.
You said wool and linen.
Either or.
Either or.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
Right.
Okay. So the Gemara says, "V'hai tana the mafik the roish the love graded the osi esev v'doiches lois esev esim in all." So according to the opinion that says that mitzvah is esev doiches lois esev, meaning 5 lines, 6 lines in the bottom.
First word.
The mafik.
Right.
Okay, so again, according to the first opinion, the opinion that says we're talking about Mitzorah, who's a regular Jewish male, meaning he violates the prohibition of payas. According to that opinion, how do we know? So in general, with Esidei Chalaisa, we have 2 rules here. Number 1 is that a positive commandment pushes away a negative commandment. Like we said, tzitzis with shatnez. Shatnez, by the way, is a prohibition that affects everyone. It could be a kohen, it could be Yisrael, it could be a male or a female. You're prohibited to wear shatnez. Okay, tzitzis happens to be mitzvah that only pertains to males. That's completely beside the point. But there is another point which is interesting, which is that if you have a positive command, a negative commandment that is only a small subset of the population. For example, a kohen, besides for 1 second. If you have a negative commandment that only pertains to some Jews, what's an example of that? Payas, right? Payas only pertains to Jewish males. A kohen also has a prohibition of cutting off his payas. It's also a small subset. And the rule is that an essay pushes away a negative and a positive commandment if the negative commandment only pertains to some Jews. It's called Eina Shava B'Kol. It's not universally prohibited. For example, like a woman does not have prohibition of cutting off her payas because, and therefore the law of payas is not a universal prohibition. So how do we know? According to the opinion that learns mitzvah to a regular Jewish male, how do we know? Say the essay, if the light say is ein shavu b'kol, a positive commandment pushes away a negative and positive commandment, provided that the negative commandment is not universal. So the Gemara says nafkalei miziknai. He learns it out of the fact it says that by mitzvah it says a mitzvah shaves his head and he also shaves his beards. Tanya ziknai ma tamad leimer. Why does he need to say ziknai? Fishanemar, because the Torah says that a kohen is not allowed to shave his beards. Yochel af kohen mitzvah kain. 1 second. I would think that a mitzvah who's a kohen has a positive obligation of what's called kedoshim to you, to be holy, to be a kohen, and that includes to positively make sure not to violate any of the prohibitions of kahuna. He also has a negative prohibition not to shave his beards. So what happens if you have a kohen who's a mitzvah? Is he allowed to shave his head? So the pasuk says Ziknai shaves is he allowed to shave his beards? The Gemara says Ziknai tells him that even though he's a kohen and he's a mitzvah, Talmud Leimer Ziknai, he's allowed to shave his beard, and therefore we see from here he can violate a positive and negative commandment. And the reason why is because this positive and negative commandment is not universal; it's limited to a kohen. Okay. According to the opinion that says that Rosh of Mitzvah is telling you Nazir, right? And Nazir is a situation of positive and negative commandments, right? Because Nazir has a positive commandment to grow his hair, a negative commandment, don't cut your hair. And as a Mitzvah, he violates both. Let's learn it out of Ziknai. Okay, so the Gemara points out here the obvious, which is that actually, you don't learn out Nazir to everybody else. Let me explain as follows. A Nazir is a lav hashavah b'kol. Anyone who's a Nazir, whether they're a male, female, kohen, Yisrael, it doesn't make a difference. You cannot cut your hair and you must grow it. It's actually a lav hashavah b'kol, even though it only pertains to someone who's a Nazir, but anybody can become a Nazir. So therefore, a Nazir actually is a lav hashavah b'kol. But what we know is that the truth is the opposite. The truth is that you cannot make such a generalization, because generally speaking, in a situation where you have a lav and an essay that's shava b'kol, it's universal, you actually can't violate it. Essay is not doichalais essay. So Gemara says, "Lo tamech the kaimelam ba'alma." This that we know in general. Top of nun chesam and base. The loy asi essay v'dochias loy say essay. That in generally speaking, a positive commandment does not override a universal positive and negative commandment. Leilef mikayin. Why don't we learn from Kayin? You can't learn it out of Kayin because Kayin is a lav she'ein shava b'kol. So in other words, Kayin does not serve as a source of the fact, if you learn out of Kayin from Ziknai, right, that a Kayin who's a Nazir shaves his beard, because he shaves all his hair, even though Kayin is a positive and a negative commandment. And that's because a Kayin is a lav she'ein shava b'kol. It's not universal. It only pertains to a kohen. So therefore, that's why a positive commandment overrides it. Now, if that's the case, I wouldn't know Nazir from kohen, because Nazir is a universal commandment. And therefore, it's actually a unique category that Nazir, despite the fact that Nazir is universal, Nazir still overrides Nazir. And that's specifically what the pasuk is coming to tell me. Nazir sort of is an exception to the rule of Esed Dochel Sev Esed. Typically, a positive does not override a negative and a positive together if they're universal, but by Nazir it does, and that's what the Torah needs to say. Roshei, Torah needs to say that it's a unique category by Nazir that a mitzvah who's a Nazir, he overrides his Naziris to shave his head. Okay, so therefore Nazir cannot be learned out of Kayin because Kayin is not universal. Nazir is universal, and Nazir is actually unique. Okay, according to the same opinion, the one who says that Rosha of Mitzvah is talking about Nazir. Lama li ziknai. One second. One second. Okay. What can I say? I don't want to go down too much down here, but the Gemara, according to Tosfos, this is not exactly it's not exactly clear why at this point the Gemara really answers the question. Zikna tells me essay is deichel save essay. What do you mean? Why do I need to say zikna? I know why I need to say zikna. Zikna tells me that even that mitzvah overrides kayin, which is both a positive and negative commandment that is not universal. And that teaches me in general that that's the rule. Zikna is a beard. So in other words, the fact that a mitzvah shaves his beard is even though he's a mitzvah and he's a kayin. The kayin has both a positive and negative commandment not to shave his beard. Okay, so I know why he needs to say zikna. Yet the Gemara still asks the question. It's not. I don't want to. Tosfos deals with it. The Rifon also deals with it. Rosh deals with it. It's not clear why the Gemara is asking this question. It seems to be a resolved question. Okay, the Gemara brings the Gemara we've seen previously. The Gemara says Zikna mi bayla l'ketanya. It's coming to tell me as follows. Zikna ma Talmud leimer. Why does it say Zikna? The fish nemer paas zakanam leigalechu. It says by kayin he cannot. One second. Yeah, a kohen cannot shave his beard. Yochel av kohen mitzvah kain. I would think that a kohen who's a mitzvah also can't shave his beard. Talmud leimer ziknai. Therefore, Torah says ziknai that a kohen could shave his beard. When we know in the betar, how do we know he has to do it with a razor? The tiny we learn. Pa'as zakanam leigalechu. This is a regular Jew is not allowed to cut his beard. Lo yigalechu. He's not allowed to do the word of giluach. What does giluach mean? Giluach is sort of a moving process. You might think of giluach like a haircut or shaving. It's a moving process.
It's a moving experience.
What?
It's a moving experience.
I'm sorry. This one is. I'm sorry. Hold on. Pa'as zakanam leigalechu is by kayin. Is by kayin. A kayin is not allowed to do giluach. It's a moving experience. Okay. Okay. I would think if he uses a scissor, he'd also be chayev. But when the Torah says the prohibition for kayin, it says leisashkas, he shouldn't destroy it. Okay, so meaning it has to. A scissor doesn't destroy because the root is still there. Okay, so therefore, if it says leisashkas, you can't destroy. Let's say you pull them out using tweezers, or pulling it out with your fingers, chayev, that you'd be chayev because you destroyed it. Therefore, Torah says you have to do giluach. You need to do a moving process. What is an example of a moving process that uproots the hairs? So how do you have giluach, meaning a moving process, which destroys the hairs at the roots? It's the most effective way of shaving one's hair. Having Omer must be, I would say that an example of that is tar, a razor. So a kohen violates prohibition specifically with a razor, and a mitzvah who's shaving his head specifically needs to use a razor to shave his head.
The razor doesn't destroy it. It just cuts it really
Right. So that's the closest. That's sort of
you can get.
Yeah. Okay. One second. Okay. According to the opinion that says that Roisha is talking about a regular Jew, right? A Jew who cuts his payas. In other words, a mitzvah who's a regular Jewish male violates the prohibition of payas. Why does it need to say Roisha? Why does it need to say Ziknai? Okay. Now, in other words, because Ziknai is talking about a Kayan, So if essay is daichalois to say ve'essay, the positive commandment overrides both a negative and positive commandment. Surely it overrides a negative commandment alone. So Gemara says mashma lemitchi lav grade or mashma lemitchi lois to say ve'essay, because Zignai tells me both lav grade, they're just a single lav, a single prohibition, and also a prohibition and a positive commandment. Hilgol shakalhu v'yavayu shneim. So therefore, let's learn both of them from Kayin. 1 second. So the Gemara says you can't do this. Why not? Kayin Nazir lo yalaf. You can't learn that Kayin from Nazir. Shekain yeshna b'she'ela. 1 second. Hold on. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the Gemara says you can't do that. Why not? Kayin Nazir lo yalaf. You can't learn out a Kayin from Nazir. In other words, the fact that a Kayin had, in other words, maybe Zikna is talking about Nazir, just Nazir. That the Nazir can't. Sorry. Maybe Rosh is talking about Nazir, and you can't learn out Kayin from Nazir. You can't compare Kayin to Nazir because Nazir has a unique leniency that Shekain Lav Shekain Yeshna B'She'ela, because the Nazir can undo his Naziris by going to a rabbi and requesting revocation of his neder. Nazir Mekayin Le'Alav Shekain Lav She'ein Shav B'Kol. You can't learn Nazir from Kayin because Nazir is a Lav She'ein Shav B'Kol. Nazir is universal and Kayin is not universal. 1 second. Okay, and since they're not equal, therefore the Torah has to say two different psukim: one Rosh and Ziknai. One to tell me a regular Jewish person. One to tell me one to tell me a Kayin. 1 second, hold on. Okay, and hold on, and okay. It also seems in Tosfos that Zikna includes not just Kayin, but it also includes Nazir, because Zikna is okay. Why Zikna is more of an inclusive category than Rosh is a good question. That's for Tosfos. Okay.
A long footnote here, 17.
Yeah, it should be a long. It should be a long footnote.
It is a very long footnote.
Yeah, and that's sort of going through why Zikna has to include Nazir and Kayin. It's not clear why Rosh isn't as inclusive as the word of Zikna. And Tosfos tries to explain why Zikna is more of an inclusive word. Okay.
I've read it twice. I still need to read it again.
Yeah. Okay. Let's begin the next Gemara. I'll probably review this Gemara tomorrow, but we can see the rest of the Gemara. Amar Rav, Mekel Adam Kol Gufa B'Tar. A person is allowed to shave all the hair on his body. A Jewish male. Meisvei. The Gemara asks, Hamaver Beis Hashechi Beis Erva Harei Zaloika. If a male shaves his hair, either pubic hair or hair in the armpits, Harei Zaloika, he gets malchus. So it's in other words, it's prohibited. So how could it be that he can shave all his hair? So Gemara says, no, habitar ha-misparayim. If you use a razor, it's always prohibited. If you use the scissors, it's permitted. Gemara says that's not a good answer. Rav nam tar kamer. Rav says he can shave all his hair with a razor. So Gemara says ke'entar, similar to a razor, but he's talking about using his scissors. 1 second.
How does that connect with not wearing a woman's garment?
We'll get to it in a moment.
Okay.
Get to it in a moment. Okay. Okay, and the reason for this, presumably the reason as Tosfos and Rashi say, the reason for this is because it's considered in the category of a silbash, meaning a man wearing a woman's garment, or a man engaging in behavior that's typically associated with femininity is part of this prohibition as well. And therefore, if a man's shaving all his hair, so that would be permitted. But if he's shaving just the hair of his pubic hair or the armpits, that would be prohibited, because that is exclusively a female practice.
Even back then, it's interesting.
Okay. Okay. Amar of Chibur Abba. So Chibur Abba said, Amar of Yechanan, in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Hamaver beis hashechi beis ha'erfa, loika. Someone who shaves his armpits or pubic hair, loika gets malchus. Mesa. The Gemara asks, Havara say or any midivri Torah elam midivri seifrim. The Gemara says the Brisa seems to indicate that this is only rabbinical and not biblical. In other words, that the idea of a man dressing like a woman is specifically a man, and not specifically clothing and not shaving hair. So you're telling me you get malchus, he gets lashes for it, but it seems that it's only rabbinical. So Gemara says you're right. My like the type of malchus, of lashes that we get, we're talking here about a durabanan form of lashes. Okay, we'll continue with another variation of this Gemara. We'll begin this tomorrow.